So hello everyone, my name's Karina Urquhart and I'm the Executive Director at BIC and your host for today's session. It's great to see so many of you tuning into this BIC event which is on the subject of what is the LCF, all libraries communications framework for the long-handed version. So just some housekeeping before we get started. So we've got a dedicated 10-minute slot for questions at the end of the session. So you can either do that by asking the speaker directly by unmuting yourself. And could I ask that person who's just joined to please mute themselves just to reduce the background noise. Or you can use the chat box to ask the speaker a question if you like, and just say which speaker it is you'd like to ask the question to. The event's being recorded so that we can use it in our marketing and to let people that weren't able to make it today to enjoy the session later on. Unless you're invited to speak or you want to speak, you won't be identified in the recording. We'll also be tweeting about the event using the hashtag BIC Brunch. So please, do feel free to join in online. And again, just a polite reminder to remain muted throughout, unless of course you're the speaker, in which case don't remain muted. So that's the housekeeping out of the way. So what is a BIC brunch? So some of you will have been to a brunch session before, some of you won't. So for those who have, please bear with me. They're a series of short live online events that focus on a particular book industry, supply chain topic or issue with industry expert speakers. They're all recorded and they're shared to our YouTube platform, the link for which is on the screen there at the bottom. And we'll be sharing the links. We'll be sharing the slides after the session. So if you can't write down those very long links immediately, don't worry, you'll be able to refer back to them later on. So here's the agenda for the session. So we've got, in addition to the sponsor today, so a big thank you to our sponsor, Insight Media Internet, for sponsoring today's event. In addition to them, we have 4 speaker sessions. So we'll be hearing from Neil Barker at Civica. He's going to talk about what is the LCF, why should you be using it. We'll hear again from Neil Johnson from Insight Media about the benefits of LCF for people's network, booking and print management system suppliers and their customers. We'll then go to Andrew Daye at SOLUS, who's going to talk about the app that they've developed using LCF. And then finally, we will go to Catherine Cooke, Systems Officer at Westminster Libraries, who is going to talk about the LCF from a public libraries perspective. We'll then have a 10-minute Q&A session and then wrap up at 1 o'clock. We may, if we go slightly over, we go slightly over, but the intention is to finish at 1 o'clock. So, who's BIC? What are we? What do we do? For those of you who don't know already, we're a UK-based, not-for-profit members organisation at the heart of the book industry, creating standards, best practices and resources that form part of the DNA of your supply chains, helping your organisations become more efficient, save money, become less wasteful and hopefully, ultimately greener. We sit at the cornerstone of the book industry and hold a unique position of trust, facilitating UK and international industry-wide collaboration to reach agreement on dependable standards and best practice in the supply chain. So, back to the purpose of today's session, then we're going to be exploring the LCF. And prior to today, many of you may have heard that term before, but not been quite sure about exactly what it is, what it does, what does it mean for you? Does it mean anything for you? And I hope that by the end of today's session, we'll have answered all of those questions and more, including how it can possibly impact the libraries, impact the library sector. We'll look at LCF in its entirety, and we'll hear about its origins, the benefits and the challenges of its usage and learnings from LCF in action by exploring recent adoptions. For a nugget of information, there will be a BIC Bite coming soon. So BIC Bites are 2 pages of A4 quick guides to specific topics. So we do have one in draft form. It's just being approved. So do check back on this link for the final version. So, without further ado, and just a reminder for people to mute themselves if they've just joined. I'm going to hand over now to Neil Johnson. And Neil is the director at Insight Media Internet Limited, and he's going to talk today a little bit about their organisation and why they're sponsoring the BIC Brunch today. So I'm going to hand over to you, Neil.
Thank you, Karina. Good afternoon. As Karina said, I'm Neil Johnson, Director at Insight Media. We're delighted to be sponsoring the BIC Brunch, our first BIC Brunch sponsorship on the subject of library communication framework, and taking part in today's discussion. We believe LCF is an important step forward for the library industry, and it will bring benefits in the form of improved interoperability and enhanced service delivery and efficiencies. And it's something that I think will benefit library suppliers as well as library users in a range of ways, all of which hopefully will be discussed in greater detail by the speakers this morning. What I wanted to do is just go through a couple of slides with you and just give you an overview of who we are and what we do within the library market in the UK. As an organisation, we've been supplying public access and people's network products and services to libraries for a number of years. We've been established for approximately 20 years, working in the public sector and supporting our customers with a range of products. We work with clients throughout the UK from our base in Cheshire. We offer a range of products and services to our customers, most of which are developed in-house. And on the next slide, you will see a list of the products we have in the UK. Please, Karina. Thank you. We have ICANN Workstation Control, which is our booking system that's been deployed in public libraries for a number of years. We developed a print solution to minimise wastage in public libraries and assist some of our customers, as well as a bring your own device or Wi-Fi print solution. We also have Wi-Fi authentication. We've been delivering hotspots in public libraries, and we integrate with kiosk suppliers and provide self-service print payment and release within public libraries. We've developed these products over a number of years, working with libraries, taking feedback from our customers, and at the same time trying to work as closely as we can with other suppliers in the industry, including some of the speakers today, the main library management system suppliers, and most of the self-service kiosk suppliers. On the next slide, please, Karina. In addition to developing and supplying and installing, supporting products over the last 20 years, we've also started to introduce a range of services to support our customers even further. And this started initially by us offering a hosted service for some of the infrastructure components that our product uses, to allow some of our customers to move from on-premise services to move everything into the cloud. So our hosted services have become increasingly important over recent years, especially as we've seen a trend for library management system suppliers and other suppliers to move everything into the cloud. In some cases, we're also hosting third-party applications for our customers. We also work with a number of clients to refresh their public access offering or their people's network offering, including building new images, supplying hardware, upgrading their systems, and where required, providing ongoing maintenance, updates and support of their public access offering. In some cases, we actually manage the whole of some of our customers' public access offering. As an organisation, we're proud of what we do. We value our customers. And finally, on the last slide, I've just added my contact details. If there's anything you think we could help you with, or anything you'd like to discuss or explore or challenge or debate, generally about public libraries or about LCF, I'd be pleased to hear from you. And I will hand back to Karina.
Great, thanks Neil, and thank you again for sponsoring this event, which has, I think, probably had the most subscribers for a BIC event that we've ever hosted, which is fantastic. So next up then, without further ado, let's move on to our first speaker, which is Neil Barker. Neil is account manager at Civica and is going to talk to us today about what the LCF is, why you should be using it. We'll hear how it can benefit your organisation and how it's already supporting some of Civica's clients. So over to you, Neil.
Okay, thanks, Karina. So, yep, next slide, please. Okay, so I've got a quick agenda. So why would you need to change? What is it? How it can benefit you? How it's supporting some of our customers, and a little bit about how it works. Next slide. And why change? So we'll start with there. So if you click on. Okay, so what are people doing currently? So why do you need this? So currently, within a library setup, you have the LMS, and then you've got lots of third parties interacting with the LMS. So you've got your kiosks, you've got your PC bookings, you've got your e-resources, you've got any third-party apps that are connecting, you've got third-party databases that might need to interact with your LMS, and you've also got the open library kiosks, and all these interact with your LMS in various different ways. If you click onto the next slide. So what are the current options? So firstly, the really simple one is barcode format. So a number of systems are using this, mainly probably ebooks and things like that, where they check, is it a 10-digit barcode? Has it beginning with a B? And if it is, they let you through and let you get access to the stock. So it's nice and simple, but it's not very secure. And if somebody gets barred or changed their account, this will still let them in because it's not doing any actual checks. The second existing method is to do a data export, again, which means on an overnight basis, you're putting a copy of the database onto a third-party system for them to authenticate against. Now it works, but big problems is it's always out of date, because if you're doing it overnight, if somebody comes in and joins the library now and then go to access one of the third-party resources, they don't know you exist, so you can't use them. There's also data protection worries because the data is being stored elsewhere. So suddenly, rather than just worrying about your data in one place, you're having to worry about lots of locations. Third option is screen scraping. So I think this was probably mainly used by SOLUS in the past, where they put a bot over the top of your LMS and they're able to create an app by using the data that's on the LMS. Problem with that technology is as soon as you upgrade the way your catalog looks, then that's going to fall over. And there's also some data protection because that third-party bot will be storing data and using the PIN and things like that. The final existing option, and probably the most popular, has been SIP2. But the problems with this is it's a very old piece of tech. So it's been around since 1993 when 3M launched it. It has made it as the main standard, but GDPR has highlighted that really it's not a secure way of working because the data is sent over the internet in plain text and effectively is hackable unless you start putting it through a VPN or securing it in other ways. The amount of calls in the SIP2 have been really utilised, but it's really stretched to its limits now, and it's not really fit for purpose going forward. Next slide. So what is the LCF? So why is this going to be the answer to these issues? So looking at the BIC website, LCF is effectively a set of library standards which defines a framework for the communication of data which goes to and from your library management system. And BIC are saying at the moment this is the recommended way of communicating. So what does that actually mean? Skip on. So in really simple terms, what does it mean? A user, so a library user, walks up to your third-party application, no matter which one that is. The third-party application has got a nice simple way which it can send via HTTPS API request directly into the LMS. The LMS recognizes this because it's in a standard format. It sends a response back that goes straight back to the third-party app, and then hopefully it will provide the data or the access that is required by the user. It's really simple. It uses a secure protocol, which is a standard across the world of HTTPS, and it allows the third party to be authenticated via a key which is provided, so we know it's fully secure. And it is that simple. Next slide. So how can it benefit your organization? So we're looking at some people who've already got this. Oh, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. So it's secure because it's, sorry, yep, flip them. Karina, yeah, just open all those tabs, please, sorry. So it's nice and secure, so you don't need to worry about your network team having to set up VPNs. It's really simple. You've got full access to set it up, and the third parties can change what they do. It's configurable, and this is probably one of the highlights of it, is there's a team of people on a committee who are working to add this to make sure it's fit for purpose. So you can configure it to what it's needed, but as the technology develops and as requirements develop, you can add more things into the standard so that it can grow as your system needs to grow. It's transportable, so that once you've set it up with one supplier, you should be able to switch to another supplier and using the same interface. I imagine that early days that might not be the case. I think the key for all of us in the industry is that we push to make sure that if somebody is asking you to redevelop it for a different system, you do push back, and we can all get a standard that will be truly transportable. Because we don't want to go back to SIP, which suddenly it was SIP plus XYZ. And yeah, this should be a standard that works across all the systems. And finally, it's open. So it's not only the existing suppliers who can use this. If your IT department want to interface your leisure system or want to interface your customer retention system, they can use this open platform to access your LMS, and it's a read and write system. Next slide. So how is it utilizing some of our clients? So we've just got some very quick examples. So firstly, Brighton and Hove, they've used it to set up their new kiosks. So I think their kiosk provider, sorry, my brain's gone blank who they are. They are Freiletters, good with devices. I think they were one of the first kiosk providers in the industry to use it. So Brighton found it really easy to get this set up. They're finding it much more stable than using SIP2, and their IT people were really thankful that they didn't have to set up a VPN, because VPNs can be a little bit ropey. Skip on to the next one. Highland, one of the first people to be using LCF, they initially set it up with SOLUS, so they got SOLUS working. They've just added BorrowBox. So, and as you can see from Katie's feedback, she found that really easy to set up, and you know, they could do it all themselves, which she appreciated. Next slide. Richard at Medway also been testing this. So on behalf of Selms, Medway tested with the Financial Times. So they were able to test and sign that off themselves without really needing to get us involved, which was good. And they're also just at the process of setting up Insight Media, which I'm sure Neil will mention. and that they're on the verge of signing that off at the moment. And skip on. Final 2 slides. Configuration. The key benefit is configuration is very simple. Skip on. As a customer, you get a nice easy screen in your maintenance where you can really easily create an access point and key for your third-party suppliers, and you've got all the settings to set them up. And skip on. And your third-party supplier is given an interface where they can test and all the calls. So we provide a thing called Swagger. So if you're setting up the system, your third party can use this Swagger system to test each of the calls and get full instructions as to what to do, how to set up the call, and what responses they'd expect. So it's a really easy interface to test and utilize. And that is me. You can skip on to my completed slides.
Great, thanks, Neil. I think what I'm impressed by here, and I obviously am biased, is that it's the simplicity of it, isn't it? And that seems to be what's coming through with the feedback you've had from those three examples there. Also, the security of it as well. It's good.
Yeah, I think the security and simplicity are definitely the key things.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, and it's just really nice to see 3 examples there, to actually see it, you know, in the real world, as it were, because we're very often at BIC, we're sort of behind the scenes, if you like, particularly on our technical panels. So it's just nice to see it being used and in action. So thank you for that. I'm going to now we're going to go back to Neil Johnson, Director at Insight Media Internet Limited, who are also sponsoring this event. And Neil's going to talk today about the benefits of LCF for people's network booking and print management systems suppliers and their customers. And amongst other things, Neil will also be talking about what his organisation is hoping to get out of the LCF and how it can help with authentication and authorization, charges and payments, and how it compares to SIP2. So, and he's going to do all of that in 10 minutes. So over to you, Neil.
Thank you, Karina. That sounds like an awful lot in 10 minutes, but we'll do what we can. We've heard about some of the problems associated with SIP and some of the benefits provided by LCF from Neil. Thank you for that. And as a supplier, we work with SIP2 and web services and other protocols over the last 15 or 20 years. And although SIP was fine at the outset and did a lot of what we wanted it to do, that's not the case now. What I'd like to do is just look at LCF and give a couple of examples of how it will help Insight Media, and then what benefits that would bring to our customers. So on the first slide, we are one of many terminal application developers who need to integrate with the main libraries management systems. And when we used SIP2 initially, we were using that for authentication, really simply to validate a borrower, to ascertain whether the user had access to a PC and could self-serve through SIP2. And at the outset, SIP2 was fine. It would give us the level of authentication we needed, but over time it became apparent that that wasn't appropriate, as their customers wanted to better understand their users and better manage the access those users could get. SIP has been extended with a range of extensions, as Neil alluded to, and has become fragmented, very supplier specific, and lacks standardization. And it's immediately apparent now that we've got a greater demand to extend the interoperability in the future to meet our customers' requirements. So in my view, we're at a point of where we're passing a point of no return. SIP can't be extended any further, and what's in LCF now, from our perspective, meets the majority of our requirements. So what do we need from LCF? On the next slide, we can define what we need now from LCF to ensure it replaces everything that's in SIP2. And that's fine, but that's not enough. SIP was fine 20 years ago. it's not fine now. Going forward, we need a standard that can evolve, that can be extended, that can be maintained, and that will meet the future needs of the market. It's not just a matter of taking a direct change from SIP2 to LCF. It's about how we manage that and how we maintain that and move that forward. If we can't, and if we don't, we'll just end up in the same situation we're in now in 10 years' time. There's the scope for us to do so much more, and it should provide the LMS providers and the application developers like ourselves with the scope to do what our customers want us to do. On the next slide, please, Karina. From our perspective, as I've said, we're only one of many solution suppliers in the marketplace, and there are 3 areas that we're specifically focused on at this moment in time. One is the authentication that I've just mentioned on. The second is charging, and the third is payments. If LCF is adopted by all the LMS suppliers, it will give a secure, consistent method of interoperability between the systems. But with regards to charges and payments, that's something that we've never been able to implement. SIP was never an appropriate way of doing this. It would have been very much vendor specific, and there wasn't a standard to manage it. So LCF will assist us in doing that, and implementing charging against the borrow account and payments against the borrow account for the print and other services that we provide is something that our customers are looking for. On the next slide, we can look at that in a little more detail. First, let's look at
have we lost you? I think we've lost you.
Yeah, sorry, Karina.
Oh, sorry.
No, apologies.
Are we in the right place now? Are we on the right slide?
I thought you turned one over and I missed it. I do apologise.
Oh no, this one.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, great.
I'll pay attention. Sorry, we've heard from Neil about the benefits of LCF over SIP2 from a security perspective using HTTPS, and that's the major factor as we move forward. This means we can start to reduce the number of dedicated connections we've got between ourselves, reduce the amount of VPNs that we're maintaining, and provide better, more secure connectivity between our data center and LMS's data center. But in addition to that, LCF provides authorization, which gives an extension to authentication and gives greater flexibility and allows us to do much more. So though we still want authentication, the authorization within SIP2 is extending that in a more appropriate way. Then let's look at charges. Charging is an important aspect from our perspective, from a development point of view. It's something that our customers want us to provide. SIP2 wouldn't allow us to do that, as I've said already. In working practice, a number of our customers are doing print as you go. So one of our products is print management, though our software will calculate print revenue and print charges for our customers. Though when users take the cash, when staff take the cash in the library, they are then entering the money into either the LMS cash management or into the till. So we're looking at dual entry replication of information, and it's a burden and a responsibility on staff. Even with customers using self-service and using kiosks, they're still ultimately adding the cash that's taken out of the kiosk at the end of the day into the LMS or into the till. There's simple processes from the point of view of charging that could easily be automated and write those charges to the LMS. Having an audit trail of a borrower's activity and the money a borrower spends with the library system would significantly increase the level of management information that's available. Charging is only one aspect of that. There's also the aspect of payments. If we can look at the next slide. In addition to managing charges, what we'd like to do is also manage payments. So if a user comes in and wants to do printing within the library, say the printing's for £2, pays for the printing, what we would like to do is write a charge for £2 for the printing, but then write an associated payment. The current systems that are in place with SIP2 don't facilitate this. Many of the LMSs in the marketplace write payments off the oldest debt. So a user could pay £2 for printing, but then actually the payment's allocated against an overdue or a fine. So it's not granular enough to be able to correlate payments and charges, but LCF will give us the ability to do that moving forward. On the next slide, Karina. So automating charges and payments should allow us to reduce staff involvement. Writing information back to the LMS, we can better understand customers' habits. In addition to knowing then who's using our library app, or who's using the library website, or who's using our online resources, we should be able to better see who's paying for some of the other people's network services that are being used. So using the borrow account for charges and payments should give us greater opportunity moving forward, and could ultimately allow us to move more towards a cashless environment. And on the final slide, enhanced interoperability, better management of charges, better management of payments, a better understanding of our customers' habits, makes us better placed to promote the library services to new members. There are benefits for suppliers, and I also think there's benefits for libraries if we can all collectively adopt LCF. At the moment, from an implementation perspective, as Neil from Civica said, we're currently in a final stage of testing with Medway, and hopefully that should be signed off within the next few weeks. Thank you, Karina.
Great, thanks, Neil. I think someone's trying to get hold of you by the sounds of it. So thank you for that. Yeah, there's an element of future-proofing going on, isn't there? I think by implementing LCF, and also what's coming through here is the interoperability and the flexibility of it, and the fact that you are responding to what customers want. So they want the charges, they want the payments, and just generally, it seems to be just a more efficient form of standardization. So thank you very much for that presentation. Our next speaker is Andrew Daye. So we just get that next slide up. There we go. Andrew Daye. Andrew is Chief Technology Officer at SOLUS, and is going to talk to us today about how they've utilized the LCF in their SOLUS library app, how it saves time, is secure, and how they're encouraging US-based vendors without APIs to adopt LCF. So over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Karina. It's a good thing we didn't have our CEO, Neil Wishart, talking today, because then we would have had 3 Neils in a row. So I'll break the streak there. So who are SOLUS? SOLUS are a small technology company based near Glasgow in Scotland, with a pretty global reach. We work with 350 library systems, serving over 5,500 library locations, with another 1,100 going live in the next few months. So it's pretty busy here. Our primary product that we have is a patron-facing mobile app for accessing library services. And a large part of this is the connection to the library management system, so for account management and a variety of other functions. We use a number of different methods to interact with the LMS, be it SIP2 and proprietary APIs, so ones designed individually by the library management systems, or back in the day using SIP2 and screen scraping, where the LMS itself didn't have any APIs that we could use, any means necessary. But the newest of these obviously is LCF. So let's take a quick look at some of these functions now. Karina, thank you. So first up, library loans. Excuse the US terminology of checkouts on the screenshot here. It's obviously different terminology in different areas. So in the app, the user can see their loans, the due dates, and renew those items that they're able to renew. Sure, we could get this from SIP, but there wouldn't be a book jacket that you see on the screenshot there, or the ability to go straight from here into the title record itself. And that's because SIP2 doesn't provide the bibliographic record ID. Without that, we can't reliably get to the ISBN or the UPC to retrieve the book jacket from the enrichment providers such as BDS or Syndetics. It is a little bit dark on this screenshot because this one's from dark mode on my phone, but the app also allows you to access your loan history. That's right at the bottom there, and this also wouldn't be possible via SIP2. Karina, can you move on? So next up, reservations. So SIP2 provides your current reservations, but again, no link back to the bib record. So no book jacket or ability to see more details about the title you've reserved. APIs also give further detail, such as how many people are in front of you in the queue, the total copies of a title that the library has, and in the near future we're going to be adding a feature where you'll be able to estimate the time you'll have to wait for this reservation to become available. So it'll tell you, it's going to be probably about 6 weeks before you get this title because we've got X number of copies and there's Y number of reservations ahead of you. And with APIs, we can also modify those reservations, such as changing the pickup location, suspending or resuming them, and the ability to actually place them in the first place. Karina? So now on to SIP2's bread and butter, self-check. We added support for self-check in the app last year. Not a great timing in March and April when we launched it. Libraries are all closing at that point, but it's really coming into its own now. This is properly contactless self-check, where the library member never has to touch any of your equipment or interact with staff members or queue up to deactivate the security. We use GPS to ensure the user is in the library for checkout, and additionally Bluetooth beacons to ensure they're in an even more tightly defined return zone in the library for check-ins. We support both barcode and RFID natively in the device without additional hardware. Next slide. So I've checked something out here that I probably don't really want to go to a staff member for, or possibly have it flash up in a big style on a kiosk. So we use APIs to really make the user experience as great as possible. Again, the ability to get from an item barcode to the bibliographic record gives us much more scope to show more details about the item, including that book jacket again, and also potentially warn the patron that they've already checked out that item in the past. We see this particularly with our heavy library users, where they've got a long checkout history and they may not remember exactly which ones they've had previously. Next slide. Next up, during the pandemic, we launched Click and Collect, so a real-time, no appointment necessary pickup service that provides the best experience for library members and absolutely minimal staff time. If we move on to the next slide, we can see the library member just starts the process and lets the library know when they've arrived, and the library can see an ETA of when they're going to get there, and they can have those items prepared for the user. If we look to the next slide, we'll see the staff dashboard. So it's the staff dashboard for Click and Collect. You can see all sessions at a glance and manage the process effortlessly, including issuing items to users when they arrive at the library or shortly before if that's your preference. You'll see in a moment why, but we launched this service for libraries that were using LCF first because it was the quickest and easiest development path for us. We then made it work with SIP2 and all the other proprietary APIs we use, but those libraries with LCF will generally get new features first because it's so much quicker and easier for us to implement. The first customer in the world to go live with this was City of Melbourne in Australia. They were going into lockdown just as most of us in the UK and the US were emerging from it in July and August last year, and it's since been used in a big way in the US. And if we move on, we'll see the architecture and why this really matters. So to explain why LCF makes our life easier and allows us to bring features to production quicker, here's a little snapshot of how our app works under the hood. So all of our customer apps connect to our server first, And then from there, we make the connection to the LMS. We also connect other systems such as event management, PC booking, etc., etc. But if we can just go a little bit deeper into that monolith in the middle of the screen, Karina, on the next slide, thank you. So in reality, we actually maintain connectors for every LMS platform that we've integrated with. So I think there's about 10 listed on there. So every time we add a new feature that depends on the LMS in some way, it requires us to rewrite that feature 10 times. With the advent of LCF, we can actually harmonize a lot of the development, cutting out redundant code where we have to translate between different proprietary APIs and SIP2, or where there wasn't any APIs at all, using other means to get that information out of the LMS. LCF allows us to replace all of that with a single standard to get that information out of the library management system. So getting to the point where most of the platforms provide an LCF endpoint will allow us to innovate faster and bring features to the market quicker. It also means that the LMS vendors don't need to dream up different ways to do the same thing, and we don't have to manage the differences between, is it a bibliographic ID, or is it a record ID, or is it a title ID, or is it a work ID? These are all different names for exactly the same thing in different LMSs. In LCF, it's actually called a manifestation, which is actually quite a nice generic way of referring to your bibliographic record. So next slide. So some of this has been covered by the other speakers already, but LCF is secure by default. You don't need to add weird and wonderful solutions on top to try to add security as an afterthought. This is a really big deal when it comes to protecting personally identifying information. So whereas SIP2 was developed in a time when it was intended that a kiosk on your library network would open a connection to the LMS server also on your library network, nowadays most systems are hosted by the vendor, and we've moved beyond just single-use kiosks in a single physical location. So moving on to performance. So finally, performance. The numbers that you see here might not seem huge in the grand scheme of things, going from 949 milliseconds down to 430 milliseconds, but actually that can make a big difference in terms of users' perception of responsiveness, going from half a second to 1 second. It really makes a big difference whether the user thinks it's immediate or in real time, or whether it's something that's kind of chugging away in the background. So, but there's actually a fundamental reason for that difference, and that's based on how the communication works. So SIP2 is based on opening and maintaining a TCP connection between systems. Long-lived connections like this have a memory and storage implication on the LMS server and can actually cause scaling issues. So when you've only got 3 or 4 kiosks per library, it's not really a huge deal, but when we move into the modern world where every user can check out directly using their own device, then that can start to have an impact. LCF, on the other hand, is designed in the same way as web servers. Stateless connections where you make a request, you get a response, the end. So that process allows you to scale to thousands or millions of users, and it's a much more modern way of supporting clients. And it's why you should be looking for LCF support from your LMS vendors. It'll help us, it'll help them, it'll help you, and ultimately your users to a better, more responsive experience. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that, Andrew. Some things that sort of stand out for me is the point about the fact that using LCF meant that you were able to, well, that was the quickest and easiest development path to get new features to your customers, and that those that were using LCF actually got those first. That's worth noting, and also the fact that you've been able to sort of respond to the pandemic in such a way as well, to create an app that it encourages contactless checking in, checking out, collections, etc. And I think it's just great to see real world, again, I'm repeating myself, but real world examples of how LCF can help with efficiency, basically. So yeah, so thank you very much for that presentation today. Next we have our final speaker today. It is Catherine Catherine Cooke. Catherine is a support officer at Westminster Libraries and also chairs the BIC Libraries Committee, which oversees the work of the LCF Technical Panel and also the LCF Review Group. Catherine's going to talk today about the LCF from the perspective of a public library. So we'll hear what the LCF actually means for the public library customer, how it concentrates on functionality and standardization to make life easier for everyone. That seems to be a recurring theme, and how librarians can start requiring new and existing suppliers to use it, and a bit about the governance of the standard at BIC as well. So over to you, Catherine.
Thank you very much. So why do we need another set of standards? We've already heard that comment made once. What can it actually do for us? SIP2, we've had it, got out of date, needed all the workarounds that we've heard mentioned a couple of times. So what is so different about LCF? Next slide, please. Thank you. LCF does have some very big advantages. It is, as we've heard, developed by BIC, which is an independent organisation, and was able to draw on its wealth of experience in other sectors of the book trade in finding a solution to the limitations of SIP2. And having a new responsive standard that is open to all discourages the growth of proprietary solutions. And LCF is responsive by design. Next slide, please. We've heard that there are panels of experts working on LCF. This is actually how it looks in overview. Starting in the middle with what looks like a little cat, queries and requests for new facilities are added to GitHub site by those developing the new software, the system suppliers, LMS vendors, those people. And they are discussed by a technical panel looking at use cases. What are they actually asking for? Maybe go back to the person making the request so we fully understand it. And that panel then decides the best way of providing those features. And the work is overseen by a review panel who look in detail at what the technical panel are doing and also work on the planning releases of new formal versions, marketing LCF, and generally raising awareness and encouraging its use. Both panels include technical experts who write LCF, those involved with developing systems, representatives from the vendors, and also those who manage and use the systems, the librarians, basically. BIC is the overarching organisation, providing terms of reference, input from the Libraries Committee, and producing the publicity, events like this, and keeping the LCF details on the BIC website up to date. LCF is designed to be secure and flexible, with quick turnaround times for the creation of new messages and their addition to the standard. Many RFID, LMS, and library system vendors have already confirmed their support, and as we've heard, are working on solutions using LCF. So next slide, please. What does it actually mean for the library customer? It's all a bit theoretical so far. For many years, libraries have pushed for technological developments in order to improve the service they can offer to their customers. That's true of all sectors, not just public, academics and special libraries as well. We have purchased or occasionally developed the systems we need, then linked them together as best we can. You can have an LMS there, PC booking system here, print management, electronic resource management, discovery system, your intranet, stock management, and so forth. You want to track your customers' usage of the various systems, provide specific facilities to specific groups of users, children, members of a particular library in a consortium, those with a specific flag on their record, and encourage people actually to join and access all your services. We've seen how historically this was achieved using SIP2 with additional functionality built around it for the specific applications. Our suppliers would no doubt say that we forced them into complicated proprietary solutions by demanding services that the existing standard, SIP2, couldn't actually achieve. Problem was, you changed one application, you risk either losing the connection between that and another system, or facing large costs to reinvent the wheel on the new system. or you may not even have to change a system. A new release of one may render the connection invalid, meaning expenditure to get it working again. Next slide, please. LCF concentrates on functionality and standardization. It establishes common terms of reference used by all, as Andrew's already mentioned. If you see a spade, you call it a spade. No one calls it a digging implement. And that makes it much simpler to exchange that data set between different systems. How that data is exchanged is up to those involved, although LCF does offer examples of the most popular web services. SIP2 is developed for the systems hardwired together. LCF is designed for more open networks we now use. It is more secure. SIP2 is not encrypted, LCF is, a major advantage in our post-GDPR world. For off-site self-service, for instance, maybe at a local railway station, you don't need a point-to-point VPN anymore, just HTTPS and LCF. That's secure. So libraries are at the mercy of their suppliers yet again. We have to wait and see what they develop for their forthcoming releases. And far from it, LCF is designed to be driven by librarians. Now is the time for librarians to stand up for LCF and beg, desire, demand their suppliers use it. And suppliers in this virtual room take that as forewarning. Next slide, please. Are you going out to tender for a new system? Ensure it is using the up-to-date, comprehensive and widely recognised standard. If the supplier says they don't support LCF, you've learnt something about their attitude to development and interoperability. We really should stop using that word. If they ask you to explain what you mean by LCF, it tells you even more about them. So what sort of thing should you ask? Next slide, please. Some example questions, and niggle at them a bit more. You are after more than a generic bit of text. If they're not involved in any of the LCF panels, why not? If they are, then ask who their company representative is and when they were last at a meeting. What's actually in development or in the schedule? What facilities are live using LCF? And get some customer contacts. That should give you something tangible you can check up on and maybe keep them to later on. We're looking for the use and knowledge of up-to-date versions of LCF, ideas and development, a bit of enthusiasm for the opportunities LCF presents. You're future-proofing your systems, or at least getting a reasonable idea of what you're getting yourself into. And how exactly do we define compliance with LCF? That's still under discussion. Should it be compliance in areas of LCF relevant to the system concerned, rather than a blanket total LCF compliance? The next slide, please. You're asked for new integration between systems to be done using LCF. Why not join up with other users of the same system to push for the developments to be done in LCF, even if you don't all use the same systems at the other end? When suppliers announce their plans and integration development in forums and user group, put your hand up and ask if it's LCF, and if not, why not? Look at what suppliers you don't use are offering using LCF. Applications from different suppliers can be integrated to an LMS that uses LCF. Mixing and matching services from different vendors becomes much simpler. Next slide, please. And this approach works. Consider EDI, now a core part of mainstream LMSs, because we specified it in tender. Full cycle EDI using Edifact was mandatory. Or more recently, for RFID, ISO 28560/2, the UK data model. That appears as mandatory in most bids and frameworks now, and anything implemented in the past 5 years or so is generally to that standard. The older implementations are converting as and when replacement plans allow. It won't all happen overnight, of course. It will take a while for the older functionality to be rewritten in LCF, or more likely replaced by newer functionality that takes advantage of LCF's flexibility. The development of new services will be easier and therefore, as Andrew's already stated, faster. And therefore, from the librarian's point of view, hopefully cheaper. If suppliers haven't got to rewrite the same functionality for every LMS their customers use, they can spend more time developing new functionality and enhanced services. It's a truism, but open systems represent best value. They give us freedom of choice. We aren't locked into one solution set, but look for best of breed. And that drives down costs. It creates competition, and that keeps suppliers on their toes. We will protect our investment in technology and maximize the return on it, ensuring its continuing functionality. And the final slide, please. A couple of useful links here. BIC's website has all you need to know about LCF. Some explanation and background, an overview and technical documentation with the terms of use, information about compliancy, which will be kept up to date, and the original launch press release. And Karina's already given the link for the forthcoming BIC Byte. And there's also there the link for the GitHub site, which is also open. You can go and have a look at it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Catherine. I love the set of questions that the librarians can use to ask new and hopefully existing suppliers as well, and just the advice that you're giving there. I think that's fantastic. It's a good checklist for people to work through if they're sort of starting out. We've heard as well about the exchange of the ease of exchange of data sets, and again the repeated thing that keeps coming through is that it's secure, it's open, it's encrypted, but also I think that the very strong message that you're giving there, Catherine, is that this needs to be driven and can be driven by librarians, at least the demand for it. So thank you very much for that. So now it's time for questions. So there's quite a few of you on. So let's have a look at the chat box and see what's coming up. Is LCF UK only, or is there global interest? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I can start with that one.
Okay,
yeah, at Spiders, we initially developed it in Australia and Singapore. So certainly we're trying to push it as an international product. Obviously, the standards are set in the UK, but I think it's something that we can push out there to the rest of the world.
Yeah, and that's very much the intention of the LCF, is that it's not meant to be UK centric particularly. It may have originated in the UK, but it's intended for global use.
Yeah, Karina, we've been in touch with we work with a number of US LMS vendors. Many of them have their own proprietary APIs right now, but there's a few that we're working with, smaller ones that don't have any APIs, and we've been suggesting to them, rather than building your own API, how about you take a look at this one and
Yes.
build an API that matches this standard. As Neil said, we're in contact with a number of our Australian customers, Civica customers, back in kind of 2018-19, and encourage them to ask for this standard, and that's obviously where the development was done for Spidus. So that's the way the first rollout was. So it's very much not just UK only. We're trying to fly the flag for the standard in different parts of the world.
Yes, and one of our attendees has just reminded me as well, so thank you very much, that there is massive interest at NISO with regards to LCF, and they've recommended it as part of their FASN project, which some of you may be familiar with. I don't know if any of our panelists any of our speakers want to talk more about that.
Yeah, the NISO standards obviously using the LCF terminology
Yes.
and kind of verbiage in a slightly different way, but it's really exciting reuse of the same standard. And this is one of the things that we can't really predict when you first build a standard, is then gets used in ways that no one that was originally designing it had ever anticipated. So having the e-content vendors also implement it in a similar way, I think will, especially because a lot of them are US based, I think will only serve to increase the global reach of the standard, which is great.
Yeah, brilliant. A question coming in is there any interest or take up around the open access LMSs like Urquhart or Folio? Does anybody know? I don't know personally. I'm not aware. our speakers might know?
Not that I've heard of so far.
No.
Koha does have an API. It's pretty rudimentary. So if someone really wanted to jump into that open source world and build an LCF API for Koha, we would be very, very grateful.
Okay. And then, yeah, go on.
Sorry, we had a conversation with PTFS about providing LCF integration with Koha, and they said they were going away to look at it, but I don't know any more than that.
Okay. Okay. Another question coming in, which is a really good question. I am new to the LCF. Is it mainly for public libraries? Is it mainly for circulation functionality? And no, that's not a really daft question. So who wants, maybe go to Catherine for that one?
Yep, I would say no, it is not just for public libraries. Can be used for circulation, for kiosks. We've also heard one of the Neils, sorry, I can't remember which one it was now, talking about using it for, Neil Johnson, using it for charging and writing charges from, say, PC booking, PC printing into the library management system's cash management system. So it really is for what you need it for, and just as applicable to academic and special libraries as it is to public libraries. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Catherine. And there's another question. It's not necessarily related to the standard, but it's a question that does need answering. The session will be available as a recording. Are we okay to share it with colleagues and external partners for information? And the answer is a resounding yes, absolutely. Please share as far and as wide as you would like. Got another question is what is the, how does it work if you're talking to an organization that has a proprietary API? Can LCF be used with proprietary APIs? Who should I ask that of? Neil Barker, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've got our proprietary API, and for customers who were using that, we're encouraging them to switch to LCF. I mean, Suffolk Libraries, they built their own kiosk system using our proprietary LMS API, and they switched that over to LCF now. So it just gives them much more standardization so that they can port that elsewhere as needed. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Getting quite a few questions on is there a list of LMSs who have actually taken up the LCF? There isn't a list yet, but that is clearly something that a lot of people on here are interested in knowing. So I think that's something, Catherine, we could take that back to the LCF review group and also the BIC Libraries Committee as well, as an agenda item. Yeah, I think it would. Let's have a look at the next question. If our current LMS uses SIP2, could we look to get LCF set up alongside SIP2 and migrate systems to LCF as and when we can?
That's a simple yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can use both together. So, you know, you can move one supplier at a time. There's no big bang. You could move one kiosk at a time as well. Yeah. So.
And you can use parts of LCF, can't you? You don't necessarily have to use all of it for everything.
Yes.
I'm just seeing if there's any more questions coming through that we haven't already covered. I've got one here. What would you say the first step for a library or a supplier or both looking to adopt LCF would be? So let's go to Catherine to answer from the perspective of a librarian.
Yes, thank you. I think the first thing to do is talk to your suppliers, and I think you'd probably be better if you actually had a specific function in mind. The one I raised several times, and Neil mentioned it earlier, is the charging. We've got a PC booking system, not Neil's, and they're on the kiosks. They've got a payment facility for print release, but that doesn't talk to the library management system. So staff have to double enter it. or do something to account for that at the end of the day in the cash management system. So having that integration for that payment would be incredibly useful for us. I don't particularly care if the actual self issue on the kiosk is still doing SIP2, it's in the library, it's doing what it needs to. I personally am more interested in pushing for new functionality and extending the service than just rewriting what we've already got. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it at that point.
Yeah.
And you'll need to talk to both suppliers. I'd start with your third-party supplier, because they might already say, oh yes, we talked to your LMS, no problem at all. But you might have to then go and start putting pressure at the other end as well.
Yeah. Okay. And then to the rest of our speakers, so the two Neils and Andrew, what from your organisation's perspective, what would you say the first steps would be?
Go on to GitHub. You can anyone can access the standards. Yeah, anyone can get in there, can read the documentation, can look at it. There's examples there. It's really straightforward to get into, and we encourage any software vendor, either LMS or client vendor, to take a look at that, and also encourage you to submit issues if you see any issues with it directly into GitHub, and get involved with the technical panel as well. You can submit questions directly to them. But yeah, as many people involved as possible, and it's really easy to just dive in and get into it.
Yeah, that's probably the best place to start off with. Neil, the Neils, Neil J and Neil B, any thoughts from you? Or
yeah, Neil J, I think it's important to realise that you can change one vendor at a time. So if we were working and integrating with Civica, and Andrew at SOLUS was integrating with Civica, you can change one of those independently to LCF, independent of the other one, and then migrate the other at a later date. So you don't have to move everything across from LCF in one go. You can just move vendor by vendor in whatever order is appropriate for you.
Okay, thank you. And Neil B?
Yeah, I don't think there's much more to add. I think,
Okay.
yeah, as long as you've spoken to your suppliers and they can do it, it's then about just asking to get it done. Because we've got customers who've got LCF and got suppliers who use it but haven't asked us yet to switch it over. So yeah, it's about asking you when you're having your account meetings, ask and find out which of your suppliers have got it, and work out when you can get it moved, because once you're there, it means you're ready to take advantage of any benefits that it brings.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then there's a question on the on compliance that Catherine, you touched on. Will there be any processes or certifications in place to ensure LCF compliance and avoid proprietary extensions? So I think I can talk to that one to say that it's something that the BIC technical panel and also the BIC review group are looking at. And I have I think the LCF Plugfest might be looking at that as well. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's certainly something that that we're looking at. It is, isn't it? Yeah, I didn't think I'd misremembered, or I was hoping I hadn't. Yeah, so it's quite high on the list of priorities for both the technical panel and the review group. I don't know, Catherine, if you wanted to say anything else on that.
No, I think the panels we've got some ideas, but it needs to be fully discussed at the Plugfest. I possibly should explain. Plugfest is an open meeting hosted by BIC, sponsored by somebody, and I've forgotten who's doing it this time. In normal life, it's for developers, because it does tend to be a bit technical, well, very technical, to get together in a room and discuss things and actually hands-on try stuff out. Under the current situation, of course, it has to be a virtual meeting for discussion, but yeah, quite possibly still with some technical. It is a technical meeting, a technical input, technical tests and things, demos. And there's one coming up in May. Hopefully,
yes, the 11th of May. I can send the link round when we follow up after the session, when we send an email, assuming my email works, of course, which it didn't this morning. Okay, thank you. And then I think the last one, because we are over, how do you use LCF to authenticate e-resources in simple terms? I'm used to using Shibboleth and Open Athens, etc. So who wants to take that one? I'm looking at Andrew, but he can't see that I'm looking at him, obviously.
Yes, I think the way that LCF tends to get used by e-content vendors, such as I think BorrowBox was mentioned earlier on, was where you're authenticating with the BorrowBox app, for example, or any other e-content vendor. The patrons having to put in their credentials, and then the e-content vendor then has to somehow confirm with the LMS that those credentials are correct. You know, this is a valid user. And Neil B mentioned earlier on, different ways of doing that. Checking their barcode format or a data extract. I actually didn't realize that sort of stuff still happened, but there you go. But obviously, using LCF, you can authenticate a patron in a secure way against the LMS live and in real time. So there's no kind of data extract, there's no recency of data or all that sort of stuff. It's all real time, and you can ensure that patron is real, is valid, is authorized, is allowed to access what they're trying to access, and they're not blocked in any way or have been deleted or barred, etc. So that's how the e-content vendors tend to authenticate using LCF.
Brilliant. Thank you. And I said that was the last question, but this is the last question. I just realized I missed one. We've got a question, and again, it's not a daft question. There's no such thing. What part can library book suppliers play in the rollout of LCF? Who wants to take that one?
I don't think, I mean, there is a project for library book suppliers to create an API for ordering to replace EDI, but for LCF, I don't think there's really any connections that I can think of off the top of my head, but there probably is. I suppose if we had an LCF connection between the LMS into the book suppliers, you could order while seeing availability, but is that an LCF functionality? I don't know. But yeah,
Okay.
off the top of my head, I'm not seeing, I wasn't envisaging the book suppliers using it.
No, but maybe that's a question we can take to the review panel or the technical panel as well, because if they want to get involved or they're willing to sort of help promote it, that can only be a good thing. So we'll take that away.
The BIC real time sort of ordering with book suppliers, I think that's key. And
yeah.
And if we can extend that, so so while you're on the purchasing, you can check as your supplier got it and things like that. That's all LCF-ish, but by a different name. It's just utilizing a standard API to enhance the service you've got. Because EDI is another one of those that's been around a long time, has pushed to the limits, and has lots of bespoke bits.
Yes, that's. I feel a BIC real time for libraries. BIC Brunch coming on. Okay, I think we're gonna have to end it there because we are over on the time front. So just to wrap up then very quickly, we've heard from our fantastic speakers today about LCF, obviously, because that's what this event is about, but we've heard about its simplicity. We've heard that it's configurable, simple, secure, transportable, open, flexible, that there's an element of future-proofing our systems here. It's efficient. It's often the quickest and easiest route to get new features into an app. So that we heard that from SOLUS. We've heard about there being no workarounds, so it's not like SIP. In that regard, it's not like SIP at least, and we've seen real world examples, and also a bit about the governance of LCF. I should just remind you, because it's not on the slides, that there is an LCF Plug Fest coming up on the 11th of May, but when we follow up on email, that follow up may be next week, depends if I get my email sorted out, but we will send the link to booking that as well for those that are interested. We've had a set of questions for librarians to ask new suppliers as well, which I think is really helpful. And so I think it just remains for me to say thank you so much to our speakers on behalf of BIC and everyone in attendance. I know it takes time to put these presentations together. It's not just about what you do on the day, it's the time behind the scenes as well. So thank you to the two Neils, Neil Johnson and Neil Barker, and to Andrew and Catherine. And thank you also to our sponsor, to Insight Media, for sponsoring the event today. And thank you to the attendees, of course. Thank you all for joining us today, and please do stay in touch. There's a link there. If I just go back a slide, there's a link there to our mailing list. So whether you're a member or not, you're free to join our mailing list there to keep in touch with us with regards to events, projects, that type of thing. We'll make the presentation slideshow for this event available on our website shortly. And a recording of the whole webinar will be posted onto our YouTube channel. And again, when we follow up with you, we'll send you all of those links. And remember to check our website over the next few days or so for the brand new LCF BIC Bite, which in all reality will probably be up next week, what with the bank holiday and everything. So thank you very much, everyone. And enjoy the bank holiday, and we hope to see you at another BIC event in the very near future. Take care until then. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.